Alright, so especially if you want to improve your own photography, you mostly need to figure out what kind of mistakes you make while taking photos. And exactly that's one of the hardest things because you need to know why certain steps were wrong and how you can use that to get better results the next time when you're out there to take some photos. And as a beginner photographer, I always thought how it is possible to do that if you don't really know where to get started, until I realized that one of my biggest mistakes was to not have full control at all while taking photos. So yeah, basically if you use any auto modes in your camera, you let your camera decide what kind of settings might be okay to get the shot. So yeah, it sets up the aperture, ISO and shutter speed for you, while you just have to press a button to get the result. And yeah, obviously in this case you can only improve the angles and positions that you use, and that is good as well. But as soon as you want to know why an image looks bad and why certain settings lead to a bad result, it's not possible to learn something new because it's the camera that sets this up for you. So yeah, in the end it's a little bit a random photo that you get if you use the auto mode to take pictures. And that's in my opinion always bad because the camera doesn't know how your image should look like in the end. For example, you want to get a nice shot of that bird sitting on a tree with a nice bouquet, but your camera decides to use different aperture settings and that leads to less bouquet in your images. So in the end you always rely on these decisions that your camera makes for you, while you could easily get better results if you would go the extra mile by simply using the manual mode to take pictures. And yes, the manual mode makes that possible to actually set up the aperture, ISO and shutter speed on your own to get the results that you want to have. But of course I know, especially as a beginner photographer, this is one of the most challenging steps, but on the other hand it's one of the most rewarding steps as well. And on top, these are the most fundamental camera basics that you should learn early if you get started with photography. But yeah, actually since I personally switched to the full manual mode, it was way easier for me to notice what kind of mistakes I did because I always knew what kind of settings I used to take that photo, and later on I can use that to improve my own results the next time. But the most basic question here is, what's about dealing with bad results? Well, as I started to learn all the photography basics, I always compared my results to all these photos in my Instagram feed. And in most cases I actually was really disappointed because it always seemed to be that everyone else got better results. They got better colors, better angles, the bouquet was on point and all these kind of things. And exactly that led to a point where I actually started to dislike all my own photos because they weren't as good as all these other photos in my feed. And yes, of course, that's the absolute worst case because photography is an art, and if you're just starting out you won't take the best photos because you don't have that much experience. But the truth is, every photographer takes bad photos, but you simply won't see these bad images because no one else shares them. So what you need to realize is that you always see your own worst and best photos, but in contrast to that you only see these nice bangers from other photographers. In the end, that's a complete different perspective here. So yeah, that's why it's really important to realize that it is not a huge deal to take bad photos and that they are actually really helpful and that you don't need a perfect shot. If you take, let's say, 100 photos and only one of them is good, that is still fine. And exactly that's the reason why I always record my POV photography sessions, because it's all about just get out there, take a lot of photos, and it's just about practice. In the end, in most cases I don't really have a huge plan for these kind of POV photography sessions, maybe just a couple of ideas. So what you should do is just have fun. Try new things and don't focus on getting the best shot. Because in most cases, if you set your focus on this has to be a great photo, you push your own expectations to the max. And of course, you will be disappointed if it's not a good photo in the end. So that's why I always say a bad photo is always a great opportunity to become a better photographer, while a great photo is just another picture for your own portfolio to show your own skills. And yeah, exactly that's why I always recommend to make a backup of your favorite raw files of a photography session as well. And the reason is that you can always go back to these files to see how your photography changed over time. Sometimes I personally had the feeling that nothing changed, but as soon as I take a look at my older photos I realize that a lot has changed and how I improved my own work. So yeah, always keep a backup of your photos as well to actually see your progress. But there's one last big mistake that I want to talk about really quickly, and this one is all about to not trust the preview. As I started to take photos, I simply checked the quick preview of my photos on the backside of my camera and I thought, yeah, this image will be fine. But as soon as I imported my images into Lightroom, I noticed that my key element wasn't actually in focus, for example. And that's just because I only checked the full preview of my images on that tiny screen. And yeah, that is extremely annoying, especially if you do some client work and you have to explain why your photos aren't that sharp. So instead, I highly recommend to take a photo and then open up the preview and zoom in to actually see if everything is fine. And yes, in most cases there is a button or at least an option to zoom in that allows you to check all kind of details of your images. It just just takes a couple of seconds to notice if you actually got the shot, so do that to avoid a bad surprise in the editing process. In my opinion, it is always worth it to slow down a little bit because you will get better results in the end. But yeah, this is actually how I improved my photography as a beginner photographer. So, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you're new, don't forget to smash that subscribe button to stay updated for upcoming videos, and I'll see you in the next video.